Antoinette Frank was not just any police officer. She represented something rare. She was one of the very few black women to serve in the New Orleans Police Department in the 1990s. On the outside, she was the picture of progress and professionalism. But behind the uniform, behind the badge, something was very wrong. Even during her police training, warning signs were everywhere. She failed multiple psychological evaluations. Experts said she was emotionally unstable, prone to manipulation, and had trouble distinguishing reality from fantasy. Despite all this, the department moved her forward. They needed to fill their diversity quota, and she became a badge they could parade around. She was assigned to routine patrols, but also picked up extra shifts working security. One of those jobs was at a small, tight-knit Vietnamese restaurant called Kim Anh. The owners were humble, hard-working immigrants. Their children worked there too, 17-year-old Cuong Vu and his older sister Ha. They treated Officer Frank like family, but Frank wasn't coming to work alone. She had started dating a 19-year-old known drug dealer named Rogers Lacaze. Their relationship quickly grew toxic and dangerous. Frank, the cop, and Lacaze, the criminal, became inseparable. And then, they became co-conspirators. On March 4th, 1995, Frank and Lacaze showed up at the restaurant. But this time, it wasn't for a security shift. They were both armed. They weren't there to protect the business. They were there to rob it and kill anyone who got in their way. Inside, Officer Ronald Williams II was working that night. A fellow NOPD officer, a father, a husband. Lacaze shot him point blank in the head. Frank did nothing to stop it. She stood by as her own partner was executed. Then they turned to the Vu siblings. Cuong and Ha were forced into the freezer at gunpoint. The doors closed. The shots echoed. 6 rounds hit Cuong, 3 hit Ha, cold, calculated, execution style. But there was someone they didn't see. 17-year-old Cuong Vu, the youngest sibling, was hiding in a second freezer. She had seen Officer Frank earlier. She recognized her voice. She heard every shot. And then, the unimaginable. Frank returned to the scene minutes later, not as a suspect, but in full police uniform. She pretended to be investigating the murder. She called out to the survivors, "You killed my friends?" Trying to flip the narrative, trying to erase what had just happened. But Chow didn't buy it. Shaking, bleeding, traumatized, she told investigators what she saw. And suddenly the officer wasn't the hero anymore. She was the monster. The investigation moved quickly. Surveillance footage, witness testimony, and ballistic evidence tied both Frank and Lacaze to the crime. But Frank's betrayal hit differently. She was one of them. She wore the uniform. She swore an oath. And then she used that badge to walk into a restaurant and leave 3 bodies behind. In court, the trial was brutal. Frank showed no emotion. Families of the victims wept in the gallery. Cuong Vu testified against the woman she once trusted. And after all the evidence was laid bare, the jury didn't need long to decide. 22 minutes. That's how long it took to sentence Antoinette Frank to death. Today, nearly 30 years later, she remains on Louisiana's death row, the only woman still waiting for execution. What makes this story so terrifying isn't just the violence, it's the betrayal. Frank wasn't a criminal hiding in the shadows. She was in uniform. She had the authority to arrest, to protect, to uphold the law. And instead, she turned that power into a weapon. This wasn't just a crime. It was an execution carried out by someone the community trusted most. And just when you think this is as dark as it gets, the next case shows what happens when a crime scene expert decides to cover up her own murder with concrete. Officer Ronald Williams II wasn't just another name on the force. He was a 6-year veteran of the department, well-respected and deeply involved in his community. He had a wife, 2 young children, and was known for mentoring new recruits. The night he died, he was simply doing a favor, filling in on a quiet off-duty shift to help out a friend. He never expected to be ambushed by someone who wore the same uniform he did. In court, the most heartbreaking moment came when William's widow took the stand. Through tears, she described how her son still asked when his father was coming home. "How do you tell a child," she said, "that his daddy was killed by someone who was supposed to be his teammate?" The courtroom went silent. Even the judge looked shaken. When the victim's family members addressed the court during sentencing, they didn't just ask for punishment, they demanded answers. "Why?" they asked. "Why did you do it? Why didn't you just take the money and leave?" But Frank offered nothing. No apology, no explanation, just silence. Her lack of remorse became one of the deciding factors in her death sentence. Prosecutors painted her as cold, calculating, and completely devoid of empathy. The jury agreed. The judge didn't mince words either, calling her actions the deepest betrayal of public trust imaginable. The media exploded. Headlines across the country branded her the killer cop. Night after night, television anchors replayed the footage of her return to the crime scene, in uniform, pretending to investigate the very murder she helped commit. It was the kind of story the public couldn't turn away from. A real-life horror film, except this one was true. Even in prison, Frank remained a mystery. Guards described her as quiet, polite, even chillingly normal. She never confessed, never explained her motive. To this day, no one knows exactly why she did it. Was it greed? Was it thrill? Was it love for la cause? Maybe it was all of it, or none of it. And that's what makes her story so terrifying. She didn't snap, she planned. She walked in with a badge and left behind 3 bodies. In the decades since, Louisiana has executed few women. Her appeals have stalled, and while many forget her name, the families of her victims never do. Every holiday, every birthday, every quiet moment, they remember what was taken and who took it. Antoinette Frank sits in a 6x9 cell waiting. The last uniform she'll ever wear won't be blue, it'll be prison gray. And this was just the first case. Ashley MacArthur seemed like someone you could trust. She'd worked as a crime scene technician for the sheriff's office, cleaned up horrors you and I can't imagine. She had a respected job, knew the forensic system inside and out, and even ran her family's jukebox and pool table rental business in Pensacola, Florida. But beneath that trusted exterior, something darker was growing. In September 2017, 33-year-old Taylor Wright, a former Jacksonville police officer turned private investigator, vanished. She was facing a fierce custody battle after months of divorce, and the court had ordered her to withdraw $100,000 to pay legal fees. Wanting to keep it safe, she gave $34,000 to Ashley MacArthur just in case. That's when Taylor's life changed forever. The last time she was seen alive, she was on a date, not with a man, but with her girlfriend, a school administrator named Cassandra Waller. Taylor had moved in with Cassandra that weekend, hopeful about a new chapter, but then she texted, "I need a few days to think," and she disappeared. Cassandra insisted something was wrong. Taylor never ghosted without explanation, but Ashley told police Taylor was emotional and went riding, and never returned. For days, Ashley claimed she didn't know where Taylor was, but investigators started to connect dots that didn't match her story. Cell phone records supposedly placing them riding in East Milton pointed instead to a secluded farm owned by Ashley's aunt and uncle, far from horseback trails. Then came the financial trail. Ashley deposited Taylor's $34,000 check into her own account. Surveillance footage showed Ashley buying bags of cement and potting soil the day after Taylor vanished. Concrete? In a crime scene expert's world, red flag. Weeks passed with no sign of Taylor until detectives executed a search warrant at the farm. Using canine units and excavators, they uncovered a shallow grave covered in concrete and potting soil. Inside was a skull, fractured by a bullet hole. Beside it lay Taylor's signature bullet necklace. There was no doubt. Private investigator Taylor Wright was dead and buried by her friend. Taylor had one gunshot wound to the back of her head. Investigators later said it was a clean, execution-style killing. At Ashley's murder trial in August 2019, the courtroom became a stage for betrayal and cold calculation. Prosecutors presented the unshoppable story. Taylor drove to Ashley's believing she would get her money back. Instead, Ashley lured her to the farm, shot her once in the back of the head, then encased her body in concrete. She lied about their location, tried to throw investigators off the trail, and even took Taylor's phone to send reassuring texts to calm her girlfriend. Testimonies revealed Ashley's double life. She admitted skimming funds from the family business, jukebox income. To cover it up, she allegedly set a fire at the business to destroy records. She used part of Taylor's money to pay off credit cards, to fuel a secret romance, and left Taylor with empty promises. One friend testified Ashley bragged about buying cocaine to spike Taylor's beer, to stage a drug overdose. When that didn't work, she pulled the trigger. Outside the courtroom, emotion boiled over. Taylor's foster mom, Nancy Murchison, choked back tears. "I need answers. She would not have taken off. Something horrible happened to her." Her girlfriend, Cassandra, echoed the pain. "I lost her. She was my best friend. Ashley took someone I loved." In just 4 days, the jury reached a verdict: guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. Life in prison without parole for at least 25 years. Ashley never took the stand. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for forgiveness, perhaps knowing none would come. Today, she serves her sentence in Florida's Lowell Correctional Institution, a maximum security women's prison. What happened here wasn't a crime of passion. It was cold, calculating, and deeply personal. Petty theft escalated to murder, committed by someone trained to solve crime. Taylor's community lost more than a private investigator. They lost a mother, a mentor, a partner in healing. The ripple effects of Ashley's betrayal are still felt today. And that betrayal, it cuts deep. Not just because she killed a friend, but because she manipulated tragedy to silence her victim, to justify the lies. Ashley's history of manipulation didn't start with Taylor. Friends and acquaintances described her as charming on the outside, but often controlling behind closed doors. She had a tendency to spin stories, play people against each other, and hide details even from those closest to her. At one point, she faked damage reports to collect insurance money from her business, using a fire she allegedly set herself to destroy financial records. Those same records were being used in a lawsuit against her at the time. She had been married before, but kept details of her previous relationships guarded. Even her family seemed unaware of just how deeply she was spiraling. One detective later told local reporters, "She had the perfect cover. People assumed she was clean because she worked with police. But when you looked deeper, you realized this woman had been lying to everyone for years." At trial, the prosecution played a short recording of Ashley joking with friends just days after Taylor vanished. In it, she casually mentions wanting to get away for a bit because things were getting messy. When asked what she meant, she laughed and said, "It's all just concrete and secrets, baby." The courtroom gasped. Taylor's sister sobbed as she recounted how Taylor had trusted Ashley with everything, including fears about her ex-husband, financial stress, and even protection. Ashley was supposed to be her safe person, but she became her executioner. The state presented over 50 pieces of evidence, from shovel receipts to text messages to GPS logs. The defense had almost nothing, no alibi, no alternative theory, just silence. In her closing argument, the prosecutor said she knew where to bury the body. She knew how to hide the evidence, but what she couldn't bury was her guilt. And just like that, one of the most shocking betrayals ever committed by someone inside the law ended with a life sentence behind bars. Officer Megan Hall walked into the La Vergne, Tennessee Police Department with high hopes. Young, driven, and fresh out of the academy. She was engaged to be married, eager to make a difference, and had earned a reputation for being kind and professional. She seemed relatable, the kind of officer people felt safe around, until the rumors began. In early 2022, whispers floated down the station's hallways. A few officers joked it was station-wide folly, but then things got serious. Evidence surfaced, text logs, body camera clips, security footage showing days off duty but on departmental time. Patterns emerged too obvious to ignore. It turned out Hall had been carrying on duty sexual relationships with at least 6 male officers, a sergeant, a detective, her supervisor, all in uniform on shift inside patrol cars, even at official PD social events. Some acts were recorded by body cams, others were caught in hallway video clips meant for the department's security feed. The scale of the scandal exploded in January 2023 when internal investigators presented their findings to city leaders. Hall confessed to the affairs. She said the first encounter came from a moment of loneliness. She'd been assigned to late-night shifts, missed her fiancé, and met a senior officer who offered comfort. Soon it became a pattern. At first, the relationship seemed consensual, but word spread that senior officers pressured her, promising promotions or favorable assignments in exchange for intimacy. Co-workers who didn't participate were sidelined. Those who did received perks. The department's chain of command was being subtly twisted, and a veteran detective told investigators he'd overheard other officers refer to Hall's actions as spreading influence through the ranks. Hall was suspended. Then she filed a lawsuit claiming she'd been groomed and coerced. She detailed how, early in her career, a married supervisor invited her into his office to talk about performance, only for the door to lock behind her. She said she lacked the experience or confidence to refuse, and feared losing her job. Each sexual encounter she described in the lawsuit was framed as a choice she didn't fully understand until it was too late. When the scandal became public, it hit the La Vergne community hard. Local headlines asked, "How deep does the rot go? And are La Vergne officers safe to trust?" Memes popped up overnight. Political opponents used it to question the mayor's oversight. Citizens demanded audits. At the next town hall, dozens walked out chanting, "Reform now!" 5 officers were fired, 3 were suspended. The police chief, who'd known some of the participants personally, resigned under pressure. The department entered a full leadership reset. As the lawsuits and public relations fallout unfolded, Hall's legal team pressed a federal civil rights lawsuit demanding $1 million, alleging the city allowed a culture of sexual coercion. Internal emails later revealed some officials privately worried Hall might expose even more names. They described it as a Pandora's box too dangerous to open. The city settled for $500,000, a deal many described as a buy for silence. But community outrage didn't subside. Victims of the scandal, including new recruits and veteran officers, came forward. Some accepted therapy, others retired early, others remained haunted by the betrayal. But the human cost was the hardest part. Hall's fiancé, who'd once bragged about her accomplishments, ended their engagement after the lawsuit became public. Her parents received harassing phone calls. People on her childhood street began whispering when she passed by. And instead of wearing the blue she dreamed of, she now lived with a badge tarnished beyond repair. Internal reviews later revealed a staggering number of calls went unanswered the night Hall was on duty with other involved officers. One dispatcher estimated the city's crime clearance rate dropped 15% that month. As more officers pulled back, morale plummeted, and public trust vanished. In a deeply uncomfortable letter made public, a local pastor wrote, "I once prayed for her strength as she patrolled our streets. Now I'm left wondering, when power walks behind a badge, what happens to innocence?" The department promised sweeping reforms. Every officer now receives regular training on workplace boundaries and consent. Supervisory roles are reviewed, and body cam logs are audited weekly. La Vergne's City Council passed a no-tolerance policy, with immediate suspension and mandatory counseling for misconduct allegations. Yet the damage remains. A community's trust is fragile, and it takes years, maybe decades, to rebuild what a single scandal shattered in just 6 months. This wasn't about murder, but it was a betrayal that reached deeper. A misuse of power that nearly destroyed an entire department and left a city questioning the integrity of its protectors. Before she became a police officer, Megan Hall grew up in a conservative household in rural Tennessee. Former classmates described her as quiet, a little shy, but always trying to prove herself. She graduated from Middle Tennessee State University with a degree in criminal justice, motivated by what she described as a personal calling to protect others. But that ambition came with personal struggles. Former friends say Megan often expressed insecurities about being seen as weak in a male-dominated field. She trained hard, she stayed late, and when she finally earned her badge, she posted a long social media tribute to her fiancé, writing, "You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." That post was deleted months later. When the scandal broke nationally, it wasn't just Tennessee news covering it. Major outlets like CNN, FOX, and USA Today picked it up. It even went viral on TikTok and Reddit. Clips of Megan's face were used in memes, joke compilations, and podcasts. Her name became a punchline, but behind the screen she was unraveling. A local therapist later told the city council, "We often talk about PTSD from trauma on the streets, but what we're seeing now is trauma from betrayal within the department." Hall's lawsuit cited emotional breakdowns, panic attacks, and a suicide attempt following the scandal. She was abandoned by the same system that welcomed her, her attorney said. She didn't just lose a job, she lost her identity. Investigators found that Megan wasn't the only female officer approached for favors. The report included redacted testimony from another recruit who said she was also propositioned by one of the suspended officers but declined and was subsequently given fewer shifts. That's what triggered the DOJ to monitor La Vergne PD for civil rights compliance. It's not just a local matter anymore. Federal eyes are watching. Meanwhile, the town itself is divided. Some see Hall as a predator, others see her as a product of a toxic culture that protected bad behavior, as long as it stayed quiet. Megan Hall hasn't given a public interview since the scandal. She's moved out of state, but her case is still cited in police ethics seminars and sexual harassment training courses across the country. It's a reminder that power can be misused in more ways than violence. And when trust breaks down inside the very departments meant to serve justice, the damage doesn't just hit the headlines, it hits home.